That's, just testing. Excuse me. Yes? Sustenance, what we stopped. No, not. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think nearly everybody has arrived. Henry Sheehan is my name from the National Insulation Association. Delighted to see you all here in such great numbers. It's been 2 years since we've had an energy show, and we all know, unfortunately, some of the things that have happened in those 2 years. But I think that we're entering a very exciting time. We have a very ambitious plan in place from government, and I think that it incumbent on us all to do everything we can to ensure that we buy into this and that, in as best as possible, that a plan is delivered. There's a lot at stake for everybody, for all stakeholders, from individual householders. It's win-win once we get it right. Just a brief couple of words, and I'm in this business for over 40 years, I hate to say, right? and in the installation side of the energy saving business. The company that I joined over 40 years ago now, when you could think about vision, the man that founded the company, he was generating electricity from the river, he had external wall insulation in the offices, and he had underfloor heating. And if you consider where things have gone since, and look back at that, and what vision that was, well, if ever, we've moved on so far, new technologies, everything is in place, the funding is in place, and now it's time to really, really put the show on the road. It's been going along for the last number of years where, at a certain level, as we all know, SEAI playing their part and putting all the schemes and systems in place. So now is the time to ramp it up. And I think nearly everybody in this room has an interest in some sort or other, and there is something in it for everybody. We can't ignore what's happened in the last number of years, what's happening with the environment and the planet. We've had all the other issues, and now, if we never really saw it before, the energy costs are rocketing again. I remember oil prices back in the 70s and petrol strikes and things like that. We're in a new world, a lot of uncertainty. But there are so many things that we can do to help the situation, and I think that what's happening with the government plan is really, really exciting. I was thinking about it last night, and if we had a company coming to Ireland to say that they were going to create 12, 15,000 jobs, sustainable jobs over the next 10, 15 years, we'd be biting their hand off. And that there would probably be, look, if that were happening, to locate it in 2 or 3 places, 2 or 3 probably big cities. This retrofit program is going to be rolled out across the entire country, from Malin to Mizen. And people won't have to travel far. They won't be going to the one location. And I think that if we can get the training right, get the upskilling right, the manning, we have a great chance of delivering this. But this is not an easy task, and I think you all recognise that, and I can certainly know and see, and talking to people throughout the country, what has to be done. And we have today, we're lucky to have a panel of people here that are very, very au fait with what's happening and what's required. And it's a good time to be talking about it, but talking won't deliver it. We've simply got to do it. I suppose, coming from an insulation background, I always refer to the term fabric first. And fabric first is absolutely crucial to get to where we want to get to. You can have all the modern technology, absolutely 100%, but we've got to get the fabric first right. And I'll say that unashamedly, but from the point of view of airtightness, insulation, and all other measures that will deliver together with the new technologies. There's no doubt about it. There's opportunity. There is money to be made. There's money to be saved, and the country and the population will benefit from this program. But we all have got to get behind it. And what I would say is, get it right first time. Quality is of the essence. We've got to get the quality right. There's no point in coming back in 5, 10, 15 years, oh, this happened, that happened. We don't want to be retrofitting a retrofit. And I know that SEAI, through their inspectorate and through their quality regime, will be insisting that be done. But it's up to the contractors, and it's up to everybody else involved to ensure that we get it right, because there's no second chance. I'm not going to say much more other than to say the government have to be commended. We must have buy-in. When you look at situations where we have grants up to 80% for some measures, more houses being upgraded for free, and the €25,000 approximate grant, there isn't a lot wrong with that. So we must embrace it, and let's go for it. The time is now. I'm now, without any further ado, going to hand you straight over to Adrian Joyce from Renovate Europe and Secretary General of EuroAce. He's come over this morning to speak to us, and Adrian is well versed in the whole retrofit business. He's been a very strong advocate for many, many, many years, and he's been blowing the trumpet with a lot of success in Brussels. So Adrian, please. Okay, folks. Just take all this nonsense away.
First of all, thank you very much, Henry, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to come back to Dublin to give a talk. Yeah, closer. Always a pleasure to come back to Dublin to give a talk to my peers and to bring a European perspective to the debates that go on here in Ireland, and to talk about the challenges, maybe in a bit about the bottlenecks that face us all. As Henry said, I've been advocating for highly ambitious energy efficiency targets for buildings already for 15 or 20 years in Brussels. And a lot of what we have been advocating for are now coming into law, and member states are beginning to set national targets that are commensurate with the ambitions that we've been asking for. So what I hope to do is kind of set the scene about the current state of play, and as required in the title, to talk a little about the National Recovery and Resilience Plans, which came with the COVID relief funds. And then I'm happy to take questions if that's appropriate, and indeed to take part in the panel debate. Up. Okay, I'd like to do that. I can do that. Yes, there's a Slido poll running at the moment to find out the profile of the audience. And if you haven't used Slido, it's a wonderful interactive tool for conferences like ours. And you just go on to sli.do and put in the code 059986, and then I can know who's in the audience, because it's the first question. Are you a design professional? Are you a contractor, an installer, a product manufacturer, a BER assessor, or other, just to get a feel. And then through the Slido, you can ask questions to the panel directly. We have a Slido master who will collate those for us. So I'd like to start by recalling for you the size of the challenge at European level. Across Europe, we have approximately 210 million buildings, and if they were all a one-story heated space, they'd cover the country of Belgium. That's the floor area that's being tempered or modified for us to live in them. They represent 50% of fixed capital assets. They represent 40% of our primary energy consumption and 36% of our greenhouse gas emissions. If we don't deal with those emissions and that wastefulness, all the climate targets that we've set are never going to be met. So it really underlines for me the importance of addressing the building sector. The construction sector, now called an ecosystem within the jargon of the European Commission, represents an annual turnover, even in the depths of the economic crisis, of about 1,400 billion euro. They employ directly around 25 million people across Europe in 3.5 million enterprises, meaning that about 97% of those enterprises are micro enterprises, a feature I'm sure you recognize here in Ireland as well. As for the performance of the stock, the Buildings Performance Institute Europe carried out a very detailed survey of the energy performance certificates, the BERs, across Europe. And as you see on the slide, they found that only 3% of buildings reached the A class, which is best in class, and meaning 97% of our buildings ought to get a retrofit. In addition, and not that long ago, Navigant did a very major study for the European Commission on the rates and ambition of energy renovations across Europe. And they found, for me, a surprising number. They found that 9% of buildings on average across Europe are visited by a builder or an installer every year. But of those visits, only 1% of the building stock are getting an energy renovation, and of those only 20%, so 0.2%, are deep renovations, achieving 60% or more savings, meaning that the vast majority of works carried out to buildings are just tinkering at the surface of the performance of the building. Bad news for advocates like me and for interested parties like you. So when we talk about increasing the renovation rate and ambition, we're starting from a very low base across Europe as a whole. But when we do look at energy renovation, we say you must take a holistic approach. Henry mentioned it already, that a fabric first is a mantra for your industry. And beyond addressing that energy loss first, you need to consider the installation of highly efficient technical building equipment and services. You must exploit opportunities like digitalization and monitoring and data collection, and share that data so we can all learn from each other's experiences and build our knowledge base moving forward to face the challenges that are huge down the road ahead. And I can't, it's not actually specifically on the slide, but ventilation can never be forgotten. We used to say 30 years ago, insulate tight, ventilate right. And that mantra is, for me, a more powerful one, than just simply fabric first, because you can't just seal up a building and expect it to be healthy. Then we constantly call for the delivery of a quality outcome. There's no point in shooting ourselves in the foot and doing a shoddy job and having to go back at work time and time again and downgrade our reputation. So for quality, we promote pertinent, independent advice in the planning and design stages. We promote high quality materials and best in class or best available technology equipment, so they're future-proofed, and clearly expert installation works, and I'm aware of the challenges on the installation side and the number of workers that are available. But what was the policy answer at European level to these challenges and this profile that I've set out? Well, it was to launch what's called the EU Renovation Wave Strategy back in October 2020. And this was the first time that a strategy of the European Commission addressed specifically renovation of buildings. And in it, they commit to bring forward proposals, that's the Commission's job, that would at least double, and then I put in brackets, medium and deep energy renovation rates, because they appreciate that you can't just have more renovation, you have to have the right kind of renovation. By doing so, they would increase the ambition of each renovation and save more energy, reducing greenhouse gas emissions along the way, with a strong focus on alleviating energy poverty, creating jobs, aiding economic recovery from the COVID crisis that came subsequently, and undertake those legislative reviews that I will briefly talk to you about. But within that strategy, they said that their aim, their target for 2030 is that the building stock in the EU will reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2030. It will reduce its energy demand by 14%, and it will reduce energy for heating and cooling by 18%. And in the process, they will deep renovate 35 million building units, is the phrase they use. Now, I like numbers. If you take the 35 million buildings, that's 1/6 of the building stock. And if renovating those buildings must deliver 14% reduction, then each of those renovations is an 84% reduction in energy demand. And that is not being achieved across Europe in any country that I'm aware of. So these are, from the Commission, highly ambitious targets. The greenhouse gas emission reduction by 60% speaks to a large desire to ramp up renewable supply to buildings, and not so much a reduction of energy demand in buildings, which this is a debate I constantly have. Energy demand reduction is far too often overlooked in favor of switching to renewable sources or green sources. That's a whole other debate. So what do we think is needed? Mobilization, for me, is the key word, but mobilization across all sectors. I'm not going to comment to each of these, but national governments have a crucial role to play. You will see the Irish government is doing its part. It's admired by its peers in the European Union, and the recent retrofit scheme announced by SEAI is the best in Europe today. no question about it in my mind. Building owners in all segments must accept the burden, and I accept it's a burden, that they will have to foot the bill or part of the bill to get their houses and their buildings and their offices up to scratch. And we say that the building owners segment that should go first is the public building owners, because that's our money that they're using, and they should use that to upgrade the public buildings first. We're going to need financing at both EU and national levels. We need to see technical and project development support being rolled out, and that's happening at EU level through DG Reform, DG ENER, the European Investment Bank, who all have programs targeting buildings. At national level, the establishment of one-stop shops, something now underway very robustly here in Ireland, and more energy agencies. And then we, in the value chain, we have to stand up and take our part. And I promote frequently the idea of a more industrialized or off-site construction approach to renovation, which is working successfully in the Netherlands, to a small extent in France and the UK, and has been underway for 20 years in Switzerland. So there are very good experiences with off-site construction to reduce costs, to increase quality, increase safety, and reduce construction times. I didn't know it was on your banner, Henry, but I agree the time is now. And what's happening now in Brussels is that the Buildings Directive is being revised for the third time since it was introduced in 2002. And we're going to see the introduction of mandatory energy performance standards, obliging member states to bring them in at national level, to require at certain stages in the life of a building that deep renovation will take place. And that's because in the residential sector, we only renovate once every 30 years. And in the commercial sector, we renovate maybe once every 15 or 20 years, meaning at best there's 1.5 renovation cycles to 2050, which is the point we must reach carbon neutral buildings in Europe. They will set out a definition of deep renovation. They're setting out a new target of zero emission buildings by 2050. There's a revised energy performance certificate framework coming, and there's going to be an increased use of technical building systems and data, a lot of what should help address the bottlenecks. But they're putting funding behind it. In the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the Just Transition Fund, and the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, just to mention three. Our Renovate Europe visualization of this shows that there's about 1,800 billion euro potentially available for our topic. But of that, 33% is earmarked as a mandatory requirement for climate-related actions, i.e. 600 billion euro. And that is already a good sum of money that could do a lot to stimulate energy renovation right across the EU. The infographic is available on our website, on the Renovate Europe website. And I wanted to use that as a segue to what's effectively the last section of my presentation, which is the recovery and resilience plans. What are these? These are plans that were prepared by the member states following the adoption of what's called the Recovery and Resilience Facility, a fund of approximately 750 billion euro. And the monies are dispersed against these plans that were prepared by each member state. Now, those plans were set out for economic recovery from the COVID impact of the COVID pandemic and lockdowns. And we were interested in the Renovate Europe campaign to find out how much of this money is already directed towards building renovation by our member states. And in the campaign, we have 18 national partners, allowing us to study all the countries you see listed on the right-hand side. 18 of our 49 partners are based at national level. What we did is we looked to see what investment flows were being proposed, how much, what type of investment, what depth, and which building segments, and then how transformational can those NRRPs, in the jargon, National Recovery and Resilience Plans, NRRPs, how transformational can they be for our sector? Do they boost the renovation rate and depth in a meaningful way? Will they address the barriers to uptake or the bottlenecks? Will they create the enabling conditions that I spoke about a short while ago? And in doing the study, I won't dwell on this, we took 5 criteria of target setting, the financial landscape, integrating multiple benefits, supply chain and project support, and implementation framework. And we came up with a table about how well the countries are doing. So the results, which are more interesting than the methodology, we found that across these 18 countries, 40 billion euro is being promised to energy renovation in the period from now to 2025. Most countries have been allocating between 11 and 14% of their overall request to energy renovation, but there are huge variations, from as little as 86 million in Slovenia or 101 million in Austria to 7.8 billion euro to buildings in Spain and 8.6 in Italy. And when you break that down with a purchasing price parity per capita arrangement, you also get huge variations. And we discovered that Greece is putting the most per capita into buildings. The residential sector takes the lead with about 22 billion promised, and the public sector comes second with 14 billion. And in most cases, they're expected to only reach medium depth. That's 30% savings, which is not adequate to reach our targets. We found that 5 countries scored strong on demonstrating clear targets beyond medium depth. We found 2 countries were strong on combining public finance with clear investment need and private financing. We found that 9 out of 18 countries were not addressing technical assistance or skills. We found that energy poverty was only acknowledged but rarely addressed or targeted by the plans, and that a majority had clear institutional responsibilities, so an agency that will be responsible for implementation. And here's the overall graph. The blue arrow shows Ireland of our assessment. And in case you can't read it, the darkest color says transformational, the orange is strong, then needs improvement and not addressed. So Ireland, with that plan on buildings, needs improvement or not addressed. And by far the best plan in the terms that the criteria we used was Croatia, followed fairly closely by Spain. So you can see not a great scorecard for the member states of the European Union. I'd like the presentation to be circulated later, because then you can have a deeper dive into some of the results. I'd rather just now go to 2 sets of a set of conclusions on this, and then a few words on Ukraine. So we came up with recommendations based on each of the 5 criteria, and we have been publicizing these across Europe at various events, largely online. And I'm happy to say that stakeholders in the countries we presented the country reports, because we have a country report for each country we studied, the stakeholders and the governments have agreed that our assessment is fair, which means they all know they have a lot more work to do. And I'm not going to read down through these, but I would like the presentation to be shared so that you can see them later, and indeed you then have the links to our website. But of course the tragedy in Ukraine is on everyone's mind at the moment, and at the European level, 10 days ago, the Repower EU communication was launched, and after the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, there was a strong flurry of activity around how can we get off Russian gas and oil. So maybe before I present what the Commission have proposed, the Renovate Europe campaign in 2015 had already published a video highlighting our very heavy dependence on imported energy. At that time, the EU was 53% dependent on imported energy. Today, we're 61% dependent on imported energy. And it's a real, shame for me. I find it hard to believe that we weren't listened to 7 years ago, where had we been listened to, things would not be so severe today. But the Repower EU communication, as it's called, addresses energy security and prices in its kind of drive. But what it does, it really talks about the old chestnut of diversifying gas supplies. Just where do we find more fossil fuels just not coming from Russia? Can we cap energy prices? Can we just put a cap on so people are not going to suffer so much? They are going to come out with an action plan by the end of May. And our analysis, of course, is there's an inadequate attention on reducing energy demand in the plan, in the communication. And we're now advocating for more attention to be paid to buildings and for quicker action in buildings in order to address this supply issue. It means there's a lack of a holistic approach. So to echo what Henry said, there are opportunities ahead, but they come with risks. Risks of failure, risks of bottlenecks, risks of too little money, risks of poor quality work. And I just hope that we can collectively use our creativity and our innovative approaches and our will to overcome these challenges for the benefit of all moving forward. And the last 2 slides only talk about the association, so don't worry about that. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Adrian, for that. There are a few questions coming through here. Is this? Yeah. It maybe applies to one of our panelists later, but from a European perspective, I have a question here. Data access the key element to upscaling current operations for companies, especially through one-stop shop. How is the whole one-stop shop rolling out in Europe?
Yeah, one-stop shops are a European idea, I think. First time I heard about it was about 20 years ago from an official in the European Commission. And it is now something that is being rolled out very successfully across all corners of Europe. And in fact, the Renovate Europe campaign recently ran a seminar online. The recording is available on our website on one-stop shops, where we had Ireland, Hungary, Poland, and France, if I remember correctly, presenting their examples of one-stop shops. And the thing that's so good about one-stop shops, if they're giving a comprehensive service, is that they are close to the people. They understand the local or regional conditions. They, if they're properly funded, are giving that independent expert advice, explaining, getting through the maze so that a homeowner or a building owner sees clearly what the potential of their house is and where they can turn to get the right kind of contractor or installer to do the improvement works. And so we're very, very hopeful that one-stop shops moving forward will become even more prevalent across Europe. And I might add that it is possible for a member state to request funding to help them establish a network of one-stop shops through a technical assistance program. It's under DG Reform. I've forgotten the actual name of the program, but I can dig it out. And that means that member states could do this at no cost to themselves through 100% funding from the European Union to help establish the one-stop shops. And then they would have to, of course, have a model that allows the one-stop shop to perpetuate itself. And the Super Homes initiative through the Tipperary Energy Agency is held up time and time again in Europe as one of the best examples of a one-stop shop approach across the 27 countries of the EU.
There's another question here. I think it applies Europe-wide, and we have our issues here in Ireland as to how the industry can push for rapid development and really upscale and man up in a short period of time. I take it we have the same problems across Europe as we have here, but the labour thing and training is something that's a bottleneck for sure.
Yes. No, right. I can confirm, number one, right across Europe, supply chain issues have been a big problem. And material shortages in some countries are acute. I don't want to mince my words. The Czech Republic, that will now take on the presidency of the European Council in July, is loudly saying that in their country the materials have basically run out. They don't know where they're going to get the materials to achieve the targets they have in mind. So this is the supply chain, the materials itself. It's a big, they call it a bottleneck, and it is certainly in their case. Beyond that, the capacity of the industry to upscale its production, say the manufacturers that I represent, a lot of those factories take a number of years of planning and a large financial investment that must have a sure return over a 20-year period. So today, most of those companies are building new facilities in Europe, getting ready for the renovation wave, but they will come on stream in 1, 2, 3 years' time. So that will be a thing we just have to work through, I'm afraid. And on the labor side, we do worry a lot about the shortage of numbers of workforce in our sector. We do worry about the skill sets of those that are in the sector, who often are focused on one simple aspect, one aspect only of the building or of the renovation, without understanding how their intervention on a building affects the other trades that are on the site, and how they must work together to come up with a quality end result. So one of the things that I promote, and we discussed it last night, Henry, is, and it was on a slide, industrialization or off-site construction is, in my view, something that presents a huge new business opportunity in the European Union to have mass customization of whole wall or whole roof panels that are hoisted into place. This has been done, as I said in my presentation, by Energiesprong in the Netherlands, France and the UK. And when it's properly planned, it takes a little time, of course, to plan and build the panels, but the actual work on site, 4 houses, 5 days. That's the actual work on site. And this is the kind of approach that's going to allow Ireland and other countries to meet their very ambitious renovation targets. And I don't see why, having lived in an Irish estate for many years when I lived in Ireland, that our estate approach of building is not suited. I think it is highly suited to an off-site construction approach for renovation. Even if people have put a conservatory on or modified the porch with a 3D drone-controlled digital surveying and mass customization through robotics in factories, which is a new industry that we're not exploiting, I think we can do a whole lot more than we're doing at the moment without a big increase in the workforce, just a different workforce. And that work might be more attractive to young people and to women than the prospect of being out in the wind and rain on a building site. So I think there's food for thought there as well.
Okay, thank you for that. There are a number of other questions coming in here, so that may be actually somewhat more relevant to, and the panelists will take up those questions. Thanks again, Adrian, for that. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Just as Adrian is sitting down, Caroline Brady of CORE, I'm sure you all know, and she will say a few words on and give an overview on the whole supply chain problem and as she sees it right now.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. I don't have the rest of the panelists don't have a presentation, so I'm just going to talk to you. I suppose to introduce myself, I'm Caroline Ashbrady, and I'm a director in CORE. We have 2 businesses. We manufacture insulation, and then we're a one-stop shop delivering retrofit on the ground to private homeowners. I don't really, I wanted to come up here and have some good news. We don't really have some good news. I suppose the challenge, and Adrian alluded to it, is supplies, what Putin will do. Russian, reading this morning that he's, potentially going to turn off supply of gas to Poland, because Poland are quite outspoken at the moment, and so there's so much uncertainty. So I can talk to you from the point of view of manufacturing. Most manufacturers were on allocations of materials, so the opportunity to grow significantly is difficult. And then we're just the same way that you're facing your price increases. It's not. It feels almost daily at the moment where we're being told. So we don't see, in our business, we don't see the inflation stopping, and we don't really see it stabilising yet. And we think 2022 is going to be a difficult year. And that's the reality and we don't have a crystal ball. The issues are also coming from China. China have closed again. A lot of raw materials come from China, and that's why we had supply chain issues last year beyond the war. So what does this mean from the industry? And we're looking at it because when you look at the pricing strategy and the supply chain for the construction industry, normally what we're doing is we're pricing months in advance of the work we're going to do, and we need that, but at the moment, our entire industry and our structure and our pricing structure has been turned on its head. Absolutely no two ways about it. You can't nearly price, like if you take a retrofit job and you're talking to a homeowner and you order windows today and you're not getting windows for 12 weeks, but in the meantime you've received 4 increase letters. So I don't know, I'm not going to suggest what the solutions there are, but I think that we need to look at our pricing strategies, how we're pricing our customers and how we're conversing with our customers. And they need to understand the risks and that it may not be a set price at the start of a project. So bringing in ways to get the price increase, and that's the length of the projects. And that's what we just see happening for the next while. We have to think differently, and we have to work differently now for this period of time. I'll speak only for a moment more, Henry, just on labour, supply chains. And I think we need to start, we've seen Tom Partland talking about the construction industry and the fear in the construction industry at the moment, and that goes in again, how we price for long-term projects, and the industry is in trouble again. And I suppose a bit of a vision, I'd like us to start thinking about the retrofit industry as kind of separate from the new build industry. And we're in it and we're working in it and we know it. But I believe that the retrofit industry, in terms of security and feeling like a safer place to work, can actually exist away from the new build market. So construction, it's almost like a long-term stock market, except it doesn't. Buildings, the price of buildings move up and down, and hence why we're in these long-term up and downs as the price of stock of the housing and our buildings increase and decrease. But that doesn't. We have to think differently about retrofit. Does that really exist? Is there not a lot more stability in there? And we hear what Adrian's saying. Europe is going to invest. It's going to mandate that we spend the money. There's no Europe isn't saying we're mandating you build new houses. They're going to mandate us to retrofit. So when you're thinking long term and we're talking to our young people and we're trying to encourage people into our supply chain, this is what, as leaders in this room, that's what we've got to be thinking about. We've got to segregate ourselves from in the construction industry. We are the retrofit industry. We are different. It is safer. Think about the last recession. I know where we were. We were in the retrofit industry. It's government backed. It is a safer place to be. Little things we can do. I mean, young people, as business owners, we need to be bringing in apprenticeships. We need to be supporting our younger people. If you know career guidance people in your local communities, go and talk to them. They're a major influence, but also we need parents to start thinking about the industry in a different way. And it's up to us that we really have to talk about this being a safe place for your career, this being a good place. And we also have that, it's meaningful because we're delivering on climate action. So I'll leave it at that, Henry. Sorry.
There's a question here, and I think you touched on it. Will the recent increase in grants be wiped out by inflation, increased costs? Is the funding of retrofit still an issue, or do we need more funding? I think the government have set out their stall very clearly, and in conjunction with SEAI, the plan to deliver. Funding at this point in time, and John may come to it later.
Significant commitments over the next 10, 20.
We'll come to it with you in it, but I think it's the same thing. It's not an issue at this point in time and shouldn't be seen as an issue. The government have committed, and it's long-term strategy. So let's not get too worried about the funding. I think let's get the game on, get the people trained, and get the big project rolling.
Yeah.
We really need to do that. So on that one, I think that's how I see it. Thanks very much for that, Caroline.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next we Stuart Hobbs from SSE Electricity will give an overview on the one-stop shop and how he sees life in this very challenging time. Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Henry. As Henry said, I'm Stuart Hobbs. I'm the Director of Energy Services for SSE Electricity. And I was asked to give a bit of an overview of what our view of one-stop shops and the importance of one-stop shops, and Adrian talked about it already. So clearly about kind of 2 years ago, as an energy provider in Ireland, both UK and Ireland, SSE Electricity have had a great heritage in terms of sustainability, the evolution of kind of say offshore wind farm and onshore wind farm. And really what we see ourselves as having a responsibility through the vertical integration of our touch points for consumers, right from kind of say the generation capacity right through to customers. And I think I've worked in energy for 24 years in Ireland, and I suppose the zeitgeist of kind of say consumers wanting to do more and wanting to do the right thing. Surveys suggest that up to 96% of homeowners want to do something to make their homes more sustainable. So we clearly saw that as having up to 750,000 customers here in Ireland as being kind of say an unmet need that we as an energy provider in Ireland could help support customers with. What we're trying to do in the main part is we're trying to move customers along that journey and that kind of decision-making kind of sort of curve from, there's so many customers who are curious about retrofit, curious about doing more for their homes. And what we're trying to do is move them from curious to informed, because I think that's largely kind of, I suppose, where kind of the delta gap for decision-making sits. And in that regard, then, help them and support them in action. In a way, energy providers have, I suppose, a unique position. In a perverse way, we're trying to actively promote and support customers to use less of our product, but we recognise that that is a challenge in the market going forward. And we see this with the price rises in, kind of say, energy prices in Ireland, that the imperative is no greater now in terms of supporting customers and making those homes more sustainable. So from our perspective, we saw that there was a unique position, a trusted position that an energy provider could take in the market to support customers in making their homes more energy efficient. For one thing, we're technology agnostic. We're neither an insulator nor we're kind of a heat pump provider or solar panel company. So we're providing, I suppose, a technology agnostic view to customers and meeting them where they're at in terms of, say, their journey. And I know Adrian made mention of the fact that, you know, we need to be promoting and pushing customers more along, kind of say, the kind of the deep retrofit. And I think things like, for example, the enhanced grants from the SEAI recently announced, which I think most of us would agree went even further than we thought it might. The statement of ambition, which is kind of an 8 billion kind of, I suppose, commitment over the next 10 years, I think is going to make a significant difference, because I suppose it sets a signal to organisations and people like in the room here that are going to, I suppose, start developing, because like most things, we don't as organisations think in 12-month periods or 24-month periods. We think in kind of say 10, 20-year strategies. And it'll help that investment in terms of new skills, new operating models, new technologies. And I think that's massively welcomed in terms of, say, supporting the kind of development of one-stop shops and supporting that journey. I think the other thing that we've clearly seen, we kind of launched our one-stop shop back in, as most people suggest, why would you do something in the middle of the pandemic? But we launched back in 2020 to support homeowners. And I think what we've kind of learned the most over the last, say, 2 years is that most people in this room and in this conference and this energy show over the next 2 days, we will be kind of, say, sustainability evangelists in one way. But what we need to do is we need to bridge the gap between the 96% of people who want to do the right thing, who don't necessarily think in kilowatt hours, they don't think in terms of, say, U values, they don't think in terms of, say, you know, they want to do the right thing, but we need to kind of, I suppose, change our language set of how we're engaging with those customers in terms of our one-stop shop. And that's something we've worked extremely hard on at SSE Electricity, is how we're kind of changing that language set. Because certainly what we found is when we start having conversations about kind of design in terms of retrofitting your home, as important to customers is not kind of say the U value or the kilowatt hours and the sustainability element. That is massively important, but it's kind of what's going to feel and look like afterwards. We have as many debates and conversations about the aesthetic of the retrofit as much as we do in relation to the U value or the kilowatt hours. So I think clearly what we need to think about is kind of say, what is that language set? What is that engagement strategy with those 96% of people who want to do something, who want to move it forward? And how do we kind of capture that momentum and that kind of zeitgeist of, I want to do something? So clearly from an SSE electricity perspective, and our one-stop shop ambition is to help and support up to 30,000 homes over the next, say, 10 years to retrofit their home. As much as the ambitions of the SEAI, we think it's kind of, I suppose, a significant ambition, but we think it's one where we have a part to play. We think that there's going to be many challenges, and Caroline talked about them, whether it be in supply chain, whether it be in kind of say the labour market challenges that are there, the inflationary pressures. But regardless, and you know, it's been used a few times now, the time is now, and it's kind of, you know, it's been said a few times, if not us, who, if not now, when. So I think we need to start on the journey. We need to maintain that momentum. I think the government and the SEAI have set a clear ambition from us, and I think hopefully you'll see from many of the businesses here over the next kind of say 2 days, I think there's a kind of a collective ability, will and desire to kind of support this transition over the next 10 years. And I think also, we do talk in 10 years, but really it's going to be beyond that. Like 10 years, the ambition is 500,000 homes. There's 1.5 million homes. You know, what we can be saying to young people starting into apprenticeships, young people looking to develop businesses, 10 years is just the line of sight we have right now. But this is going to be a 20, 30-year industry. And then when those new houses come online, they need to be re-retrofitted. Now, this is a business for the long term, not just for the next 7 to 8 years. So from our perspective, from an SSE perspective, you know, we're clearly kind of setting our stall out from an ambitions perspective in terms of these 30,000 homes. We see energy providers, and it's great to see other energy providers, again, innovating on the same basis, whether it be Electric Ireland, whether it be Energy, or whether it be Bord Gosh. They're all starting to innovate new business models in that regard to support customers, because we think we have a unique role to play in Irish society and more broadly across Europe as energy providers. So we're clearly here to kind of say that, you know, we see that as kind of a challenge that we're starting to rise to. So that's it from me. Henry, is that okay?
Thank you very much. Just in terms of engagement with your customers at this point in time, at the one-stop shop, how are you finding the breaking through and getting the deal over the line? I mean,
yeah, so we're trying to do a lot in terms of, say, the education piece and kind of, I suppose, engagement up front. So we've kind of early in this, we understood that kind of, I suppose, there was a curiosity, but kind of, I suppose, a lack of kind of, say, insight and information from customers. So within kind of, say, within our own websites and obviously through our partnership with On Post, we've kind of democratized a tool called the Be Your Wow tool, which kind of, again, helps customers to illustrate what retrofit might look like for them. It's helping inform them in terms of, say, ranging them on prices and understanding that, because, again, it moves them along that curve to, yes, that's for me, that's where I want to start. And, again, certainly from our perspective, a bit like Caroline, leads and interest is not the challenge at the moment. It's the ability to kind of, I suppose, to service those needs. And I think clearly what we need to be doing with customers right now is setting those expectations of what is the lead time from you starting a conversation through to the design element to when we will have boots on the ground and doing work. And really, I suppose, if you're not setting that expectation early, you're going to lead to kind of, say, a mistrust in the industry, you know, a question of whether customers kind of feel like, you know, we don't have the ability to deliver for them. So I think it's really, really important we're setting expectations really early. And from our perspective as well, the other thing we find, and certainly when we set it with our intent and our ambition, we didn't want to focus just on the main urban areas, because we think obviously what we need to do is make sure that this kind of retrofit revolution, if you want to call it that, is democratized across every corner of Ireland. So we've kind of launched it nationally, you know, through our association and partnership with On Post. I mean, we're in every community in Ireland. We're able to provide advice and support. The On Post relationship in terms of their funding is a key part, because we see the funding as being a kind of key barrier to this as well. So that's kind of one way that we're trying to move customers, Henry, along the journey. But the biggest gap we found at times was not setting those expectations at the start. You know, customers kind of feeling this is going to be done, or we have boots on the ground in 4 weeks, and suddenly it's 12.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, William.
Next up, we have Noel Rowland of Churchfield Home Services. Noel will give his view of life on the ground, the progress he's made, and how he sees the next, it will take 12, 18 months as to how he can upscale and try and hit the numbers that he wants and that the government wants. And Noel has vast experience in the whole area. So, Noel, take it away.
Thanks very much, Henry, and thanks for inviting me here today. In the contracting business, quite often you might have an issue that happens on site. You might have to ring a customer and tell them that there's an issue. Generally, when you're having that conversation, you'll tell that customer about all the positive things. The guys were there this morning, they got all this work done, the stuff was coming tomorrow, and everything is good. but there's just some little thing I need to tell you about. There's some extra little costs. So when I go through in terms of my presentation or chat today, I'm going to just start on some of the positives before we get to some of the challenges. So if we take a recap in terms of, like it's been discussed earlier, our current market, we've got great ambition. We've got 500,000 homes to retrofit. We've got fantastic ambition to a B2. We've got huge investment and commitment by the state to commit €8 billion between now and 2030. That's absolutely huge. The value of that work. So from a contracting point of view, you have to be rubbing your hands together and saying, this is up to €28 billion worth of work nationwide, not just in the capital, but every parish, every community in the country, up and down the country, €28 billion. It's fantastic. We've got a plan now that has been, recently launched in February in terms of the National Retrofitting Scheme. And I have to say, in terms of the guidelines with the one-stop shop, there's lots of things in there that certainly SEAI has been listening to issues that we've been having on the ground. And I do feel that there's, although there's always more to improve, and I suppose from my point of view and as a kind of contrary contractor, we're always going to be looking for more. So I'm just going to say that. But certainly it's very welcome. But we urgently need to scale. And when you're talking about the types of figures, you're talking about 65 to get to cruising altitude of 65,000 homes. That's just a huge figure. And if you were to look at, where we starting from a baseline, and again, I don't actually have this, I'm making a guesstimate here and I might be corrected later. Is it 10, 15,000 that we're starting from last year? Certainly from a pandemic point of view, it's very low. So if you're looking at 15,000 homes, and the contractor network with capacity to deliver that, which took about 10 years to develop, and you're looking at ramping up to 65,000 over 3 or 4 years, that's a huge challenge. And one of our biggest challenges is the fact that, and there's no amount of marketing, no amount of anything that can camouflage this, retrofitting your home is complicated. That's it. No amount of marketing is going to change that. It is a complicated process. And the challenge from a contracting point of view, and it was alluded to earlier, is making something that's complicated, making that simple, and making that resonate with a homeowner that just wants to make their home really comfortable and they want to reduce their bills and want to do the right thing for their environment. But our existing market is mainly, a lot of small contractors. And if you were being, and you can see, it's in hundreds or maybe in thousands in terms of the overall contractor network, if you look at any of the key frameworks, you could probably talk 30 to 40 key players. And if you're talking 30 to 40 key players, and you say that maybe those, and certainly not now, but maybe the current capacity, that they could all do 500 houses a year. And if the average cost of that, and it's certainly gone up all the time now, and certainly now, is €40,000, you're saying that with 40 contractors, they're capable of delivering 500,000 or 500 homes a year. That's 20 million a turnover each for those contractors. Now, I don't feel we don't have 40 contractors now. We may get to that point, but do the math on that. That's 20,000 homes. That's not 65. So when you do the math on it, we not only need to hugely scale our own resources, but we also need to attract a lot more contractors in. And if you want to attract anyone from, new construction and commercial construction, nobody's going to come into an industry unless that industry is better than what you're leaving. Otherwise, they'll put one step in and they'll go back again. So it's a responsibility, I suppose, to make the process not only more attractive and simple from a homeowner point of view, but from a contractor point of view. And I said, and to date, SEAI's strategy was certainly keeping the barrier to entry very low to get as many people into the industry. But the knock-on effect of that is, up till now, and we're coming out of the back end of a recession, that it has been a really competitive market. There's no contractor in the room, I'm sure, that was making lots of money over the last 10 years. Majority of contractors were washing their face. We're getting through a recession, certainly it was safer. But to scale, contractors are going to need resources to invest. And unfortunately, we're coming from a time where it's a very competitive market, or it has been. I feel the introduction of the one-stop shop is raising that barrier to entry a little bit more, which can provide maybe a more of an opportunity to make more of a return, which allows contractors to invest in their businesses to be able to scale. Our existing contractor network, as it is now, is fit for purpose for what we do now, but it's not fit for purpose for delivering 65,000 homes. And the challenges in relation to scaling for contractors are many. One challenge, contractors fundamentally need efficient, scalable operations. There's no point duplicating a process that's inefficient. Then you just have more of that inefficient process. So you need an efficient process, and that requires integrated IT systems that cost a lot of money. And again, resources to do it. We also need integrated supply chains. So for instance, we're going from a state of, maybe doing, contractors doing 100 houses a year to maybe 500 or 1,000. When you get to that level, we're going to like 65,000 homes. That's in the, now you're thinking of cars coming off a conveyor belt, off an assembly line. You don't have Toyota when the car comes off the end, ringing the tyre mechanic down the end of the road to say, I need 4 tyres. That manufacturer knows the tyre, the size, the spec that's required when that car is ordered. So in terms of integrating supply lines, and also from car lines and other suppliers, knowing what contractors have in their pipeline, knowing what they need to forward procure, knowing what they need to hold from a just-in-time and efficiency point of view is going to be important. We also need, and we all alluded to, increased skills, increased resources. And that's a little bit of a slow burner, but again, it has to be attractive. Now, I don't feel, and I feel there's a lot more that can be done. Right now, there are people, there are kids filling CO forms for what they're going to do. And it's their parents, essentially, that's going to influence them. And, I feel that we can do more on the security of retrofitting and getting those, encouraging those to fill out those CO forms. I also see and I feel that, from the department and even, from government, that if I was, to ask the Minister for Education, does he know how many of the undergraduate surveyors, and we all know big shortage of surveyors, big shortage of quantity surveyors and building surveyors, how many of the building surveyors in the pipeline are actually been pushed out of the retrofit sector? How many are graduating? So generally in those, you do your work placement. If the work placement goes well, you have a foothold in a job. So now we're trying to pull in those graduates, but they've already done work experience in new homes, in commercial sectors. Is there enough been done with the increased resources? We need training programs. They need to be tailored, focused to quick delivery. There's an acute shortage of plumbers, and I've said it before, in terms of plumbing trade is 4 years. We, in the retrofit industry, don't need to know how to fit showers and sink basins and toilets and everything. The apprenticeship scheme should be reformed, where you can do a 2-year or 1-year or 2-year apprentice to get your ticket for your heating system and heat pumps, and you can follow on then to add in the rest, and it reduce that barrier to entry and makes it more attractive. You could do the same with your plastering skills. You don't need a 4-year degree if you're doing external insulation, but you should be able to shorten that. And again, it makes it more attractive. You guys out of school, in 2 years you can earn this level of numeration. They're items that need to be actioned. We need end-to-end quality management. We need farm-to-fork traceability. If we don't, it's essential to protect the reputation and integrity of the grants programs, but also the industry as a whole. We do not want another issue in 10 years' time, be it with the MICA or anything such. We need that farm-to-fork traceability. And what we need essentially is a turbocharged contractor network to deliver. But so to summarise, we need efficient, scalable solutions, integrated supply chains, increased resources, training, and all of these. But these are all well flagged since 2019. You go back to documentation with SEAI in 2019, department, all these flags. So anything I said there is, I'm sorry to say, there's nothing new. But the challenges on scaling that are just those challenges won't have a huge effect this year. because those are challenges, not impediments. Those are things that you can work on. Those are things that contractors say, right, we have an issue with supply, we got a different supply. We have an issue with the resource, we got a different resource. But but there are several impediments to be concerned about. Impediments, a hindrance or obstruction to doing something. And these are items that have contractors with one hand behind their back, not giving them a fighting chance. And one of them, and I suppose even, leaving into this, I know some of these are items that SEAI are aware of and they've been worked on, but it's a responsibility for me to highlight it. Contractors, some of these impediments are inhibiting contractors not even from growing, but just resuming pre-COVID levels. And the number one I can think of is very clearly, and I suppose the responsibility is, I always say in our industry or our operations, you can't fix a problem you don't know about. So from my point of view, my job is to let you know. You might know already, but in terms of ESB networks, situations where it's completely under-resourced, situations where you've got the resources, you've got the skills, you've got the surveyors, you've got everything, but 4 to 6 weeks now could be 6 to 9 months. That is literally, we have a situation right now today as we all sit here, contractors sitting at home on jobs, scaffolding standing and not being able to move on. That is an impediment. That is probably one of, so all of these other issues that are our issues that need to be resolved, that's one that is stopping works now. We also, in terms of, well publicised in terms of material inflation, and the impact of material inflation is, the recently announced increase in grants. Have to say, I don't think there's anyone in the room that'll say that hasn't had a really good effect. No question about it. And right now, the issue isn't on the supply side, the interest. It's on delivery, it's capacity. But those increases are going to have a big increase when it comes to the different schemes, and it's going to affect the schemes differently. We know that one of the biggest schemes the SEAI run is the Energy Poverty Programme, warmer homes. Most contractors, last time it was tendered, maybe 2 years ago, inflation was running at 5%. They may have factored in that on each year. We're 2 years in, or approaching 2 years in, and that has pretty much been eroded. So we can see contractors dropping out. There'll be more contractors dropping out. And what I'd be urging SEAI is, if they're serious about delivering next year, pull that retender date from 2 years' time to the end of this year. Do that to maintain the inflation, and you will have the full commitment of all the contractors that are awarded on that panel and the industry as a whole. When it comes to one-stop shop and better energy homes, definitely the grants that we've had now certainly has been improved, but they need to be maintained. These grant levels need to be reviewed on a yearly basis. And I think by doing that, the retrofit sector has an advantage over other sectors, new builds and commercial. And this is the first time in a long time where commercial and new builds are locked into 3-year contracts and social housing and everything, where as difficult as it is in the retrofit sector, we might be 6 months out. So it means that if the grant programs are keeping up with inflation, we can still thrive within this sector, and we can grow, and we can attract the resources from other. And I know from department they'll say, yeah, but we need houses. I'm talking about the retrofit. I don't really care about houses, and I don't care about commercial. I just care about this sector. Material inflation. We also need to review, and I suppose within the department, within SEAI, behavioural insights, invested quite a lot in the last couple of years, and some really good data came out from that, and some people might be aware of it, but it's really good data to understand our customers. And that's something that as a contractor or delivery, we couldn't resource that, but SEAI have, and they've made that available. It's really good. But the other item I would encourage SEAI to invest in is lean manufacturing, lean processing, and looking at how schemes are delivered, and looking, if you take a scheme, you say, okay, under warm homes or better energy homes, how many times does somebody have to visit that house? How many engagements? How many travel? And that's one way of offsetting some of the inflation, by reducing the lead to reduce or enhancing efficiencies. And especially when we're going from the 10, 15, 20,000 up to 50, 60,000, every visit is important. And I suppose the current, and in order to stay on top of this, there are impediments, there are issues, but in a year's time, the issues will just be something else. They're going to be never ending. And our commitment in terms of delivering on this means that we need to be constantly reviewing, constantly engaging, constantly reviewing and addressing the issues at hand. And when you address those issues, we get to work, there'll be other issues, but we'll do the same thing. And I suppose, you know, to finish on, you know, what is, and I have to reiterate, is a very positive, you know, time to be involved. It is a really exciting time to be in the retrofit industry. Many contractors and many stakeholders have been in it since 2008. We got through the recession in it. There was talk of, you know, huge targets that seemed to be slow, you know, coming through. Money was an issue. You know, there's huge money been put in. There's been a lot of resources. In the last year, there's been a huge amount of change. Yes, there are issues, but there are none of those issues can't be overcome. So that essentially is my take, and I suppose I thank you for listening.
Hold on, no, there's a question here, and it says the speaker spoke of installing right. How do we keep quality high with quick upscaling of a contractor network? I suppose it's not really about training, I would imagine.
I suppose there's going to be a lot of volume coming through one-stop shops. It's clear that the government SEAI are focused, and I think for good order that this, from a customer point of view, is the way to go. And I think it is setting the barrier high enough within the one-stop shops that all the companies in there have that farm-to-fork traceability. And although some people may criticise the barrier, you can't have anyone undermining that full traceability. And anyone coming in, you know, the opportunities to work and partner and engage with one-stop shops, and in turn, nothing's stopping you from developing into your own one-stop shop. But certainly, it's setting that standard high enough on the quality side. And I do feel, you know, the fully funded, and I suppose it can be difficult from an SEAI point of view, where, you know, a lot of contractors can be given out over quality. SEAI are pulling up, but you know what? You have to. And the one thing I would say is, and you know, from a background of retrofitting versus general construction, when SEAI audit a job, generally it's very objective. It's either right or it's wrong. It's not what somebody feels. So, you know, once you understand the requirements, you know, I feel it's always been very fair. So I think, you know, continuing, you know, SEAI's continued commitment in terms of setting that standard and ensuring, you know, that the quality is maintained.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up we have John Randall as Head of Delivery at SEAI. So John will give his overview and a view of the future, how he sees it as well. Thank you, John.
Thanks very much, Henry. So again, I think you've heard about the ambition. The ambition is quite significant, and I think the challenges are quite significant as well. But we'll focus on some of the positives. You know, the retrofit industry, since I joined, you know, the grants were in decline when I joined about 7-8 years ago, and I think we've seen a significant uplift. I think the demand from homeowners and the geopolitics, whilst it's very distressing to look at every night, is also focusing people's minds. And our call volumes to our customer service centres, and I believe the one-stop shops, you know, or potential one-stop shops, are out the door. Like, we're running at about 150% more calls. We actually have had to put the management of the company that we outsource to even on the phone. That's how busy it's got. In terms of, you know, interest is not going to wane. There are no signs of it waning. Even with the good weather last week, you said, oh God, there's a bit of a breather. No, it hasn't waned. Interest is really, really high. This is at the forefront of people's minds. So we've heard today from Adrian, from and on all of the panel, sorry, just drew a blank on names, sorry. All of the panel, you know, the challenges are significant, but I think that the opportunities are significant as well. And I think if we look at the opportunities, we're currently in SEAI, we've 55 open vacancies. We've a significant, I think 550 or 600 applications for those vacancies. Some of those vacancies will address some of the key challenges that, for example, the panel have outlined. The first thing is supply chain. We're working to recruit a supply chain program manager. That particular person will work with the supply chain, work with one-stop shops, will work with our training agencies and government around what are the skills that are needed. So I think that's going to address one challenge. The challenge will not be addressed now or tomorrow. This is a long-term challenge because you always need a supply. People want, you know, you always need a supply of new people, new blood at different stages of their lives. And I think another piece to point out is Careers change throughout life cycles as well. Know what you get today, people won't be in business for 10 years. They will move on and change industry or evolve. So, that's a huge opportunity. And we're taking in people through career change as well. A lot of people are coming in through career change and bringing in a whole host of other experience. The other piece then we have to do is, in the short term, is the paperwork. I hate paperwork. Many years I worked in the IT sector. I absolutely hate it. And myself and the customer service manager were down in Kerry a couple of weeks ago. First trip, we tendered for that contract 2.5 years ago. It was the first time we met the management team in person. One of them said to me, God, you're a lot taller than I thought, because they're so used to seeing from the top up. Paperwork, files and files of paperwork. We've got to get rid of it, and I've escalated this at the highest level. You all hate it. The Declaration of Works. There has to be solutions we can move online quickly. Borough registration forms, move them online. Quickly, digitalise, because we've got to simplify processes. You're all on your smartphones. I see you there today, including myself. We all turn to our phone before we call, so we have to do a lot of work on that. So the other piece then is in terms of, demand. Demand is significant. I had a quick look at our dashboard this morning. Whilst the One Stop is not formally launched, and I see a couple of people here that are involved in communities, it's not my management remit anymore, but that's not even formally launched, am I right? That program's not even but we're nearly at 8,000 applications across the demand programs. That's just warmer homes and solar PV. So demand is not, and every day I look, some days it goes up by 300, other days it goes up by 50. Significant volumes of applications for programs coming through. So people are interested, and I can understand the lead times and the expectation setting and the customer expectation setting is going to be a challenge, and that will probably start coming our way as well, in terms of complaints. But I think it's important to set customers' expectations around the lead times. Warmer Homes is a programme that's touched on, and I would just want to go on fact here. Contractors are not dropping off the programme, no, despite what you might be hearing. They're not. They're still on the programme. We understand the challenges. The programme changes were announced whenever, I can't remember, mid-February. We are aware of process issues around unclipping and reclipping, significantly aware. It's actually gone chief executive to chief executive, and it's been escalated to the highest level within the ESB. Failing that, it will go probably to the minister after that, because we've met them personally, the team, and we've just said, look, this is the ambition. You've got the scale to deliver this ambition with us, but it needs to move quicker because people are being left with cash flow problems, as you said, scaffolding stuck up at the side of a house for 3 or 4 months. In terms of the Warmer Homes programme, changes were announced where we will focus on prioritise the E, F and G from, I think, the 15th of February onwards, and revisits are included for the first time. There was some changes to that programme which caught us unawares. We were ready to make this programme last year, and I think government, made a 12th hour decision on some changes. And we have 2,000 applications just in March sitting there to be, they've been reviewed. So there's probably an extra, probably almost trebled in March, the number of applications. So that just tells you the demand for the programme. It's politically very sensitive. There's huge commitment to this particular programme in terms of spend, because I think one of the complaints probably 2 years ago was, you're going trundling along from year to year. 1 year it's 50 million of a budget, the next year it's 40 million of a budget, the next year it's 60 million of a budget. The budget this year is 109. We've been actually told we can have another 100 million if you can scale the capacity. We know that the capacity isn't there, and I think we're very nervous about saying we can, take that extra 100 million. But the demand is there. The demand is not going away. I think energy prices are going to move more people into fuel poverty. So this programme is a pivotal piece for moving people out of fuel poverty. So the demand isn't there. The demand continues to be there, and it will not go away. In terms of other things like inflation, pricing challenges, we are acutely aware. We're acutely aware. I think the government is acutely aware of, the grant levels may have to be moved or may have to be tweaked in line with inflation or deflation. Dare I mention it? What happens if prices go down? Yes, they might. But, we are acutely aware, and we are looking at things. And I don't, it's a bit vague to say looking at things. We're actually actively involved in things, but I just cannot say what those are at the moment because I don't have approval to say what they are. You know, I don't really want to repeat anything over and over again, but the outlook is positive. It's very, very positive for the sector. I think it's considerably more positive for the sector than, I joined 7-8 years ago. I think technologies will probably play a key role in this, and the things we look at, are the technologies and all of that evolving. I just want to touch on one thing. Adrian touched on the European Performance Building Directive and the changes that are coming. And the changes that are coming, I believe, we will align our BER ratings, or whatever that will be, to the European model over the next number of years. And I think by a certain date, I can't remember what date that is, but G-rated homes will no longer have to exist. Now, I'm not sure that there's a huge amount of G-rated homes left in Ireland, but once we clear out the G-rated homes, it will move to the F-rated homes. So we will be mandated to have high-performance building, or scaling up the model of high-performance building. So I just wanted to touch on that. And that also needs BER assessors, and we'll probably look at rebranding that as a role as well over the coming couple of years. Okay.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much.
Henry, any questions? Yeah.
I see a question coming here. SEAI's national heat study calls for the evolution of the fabric first approach. What is the response? Now, maybe you want to talk about it now. The person that asked the question, we can take it offline.
I'm not the best person on the heat study, but fabric first is our philosophy and quality.
The person that asked the question, I can meet him afterwards.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have an awful lot of anonymous in these. Another question here is, will the slides be available? Yes, they're all available. So we haven't time to take very many more. There was one that John, I just go back and find it here if you don't mind for a second. When will one-stop shops be registered with SEAI so homeowners can avail of grants? Currently none of the SEAI website.
There's none. I'll answer it. There's none at the moment. There's a couple just over the line.
Yes.
You're probably looking at them on the panel, but we won't say who they are. But I can't. It's not in my domain. But I think in the next couple of days, because we need them published, because people are ringing every day. When will I have a one-stop shop?
Look, if there are some of these questions that aren't answered, we can meet. I'll be available after, or the other people from SEAI you might want to just ask those questions. I just at this point in time like to thank Adrian for coming over at a difficult time for himself, and all the panellists for their contribution, and you for attending. I think it's been a worthwhile interaction, and there is no doubt that there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of ground to be made up, but once we all, as stakeholders, engage, and when there are issues and there are problems, that it might take a little while to resolve them. But I sense a new urgency within SEAI to tackle some of the issues that are there. We're not going to refer to, of course there will always be problems, but there is a new drive and a new urgency which we would greatly welcome. So I won't hold you longer. I'm sure you're a bit hungry at this stage. Down in the demo area, we're having the best practice retrofit exhibition, and when you get a chance, you might go down there. So thanks very much for everybody for coming in, and have a good show and safe home.